I'm Uncle Joel with Pen and Reel. Since moving to the UK, I've been slowly rebuilding my book library. I went from having hundreds of books down to only bringing 2 or 3 with me. But part of rebuilding my library has been focusing specifically on 2 categories of books. The first category is books that I haven't read yet, but absolutely intend on doing so. This would be books such as Fight Club by Chuck Palahniuk or Geomancer by William Gibson. The second category is quite a bit more fun for me though, as it is comprised of books and authors that I'm not at all familiar with. This means taking my first forays into reading authors like Brandon Sanderson, who I have never read, but have heard a lot about how people consider him one of the greatest modern fantasy storytellers, and how he has really defined the genre for the modern age. It means picking up books like The Long Earth by Terry Pratchett and Stephen Baxter, after having only read a few of the Discworld novels and Good Omens by Terry Pratchett and absolutely nothing by Stephen Baxter. I didn't know anything about the story when I purchased the book. I just knew, hey, those names sound familiar. I read the premise on the back and it sounded interesting. So I just dived right in. And most exciting is going to the bookstore, browsing the shelves, pulling out random books by authors that you've never heard of, and giving them a go based solely off of what you read on the back. So, in this manner, I discovered Ann Leckie. I knew nothing about her, but I picked up both Ancillary Justice and The Raven Tower, and both of them sounded really interesting to me, so I gave them a go. The latter seemed the logical place to begin, as it had won multiple awards. My mood, however, was far more inclined towards fantasy, so I decided to give The Raven Tower a first go. And let me tell you, it was an interesting journey. So the story is split into 2 parts. The first is written in first-person past tense, while the second is written in second-person present tense. And this can be a little bit confusing and a little bit tricky. I know a lot of people do not like second person, but it quickly becomes apparent that the narrator for the first person sections is the one talking in the second person sections. And so it makes it a little bit more cohesive and not as jarring, but still a bit awkward. Throughout most of the book, it's not obvious why it's written this way, but eventually it becomes apparent, at least to me it was apparent why it was written in this manner, and I actually came to enjoy it a bit. I'm still not entirely a fan of second person, but for this book, I think it works. The writing style may very well be the main thing that prevents people from reading this book. The story is interesting, the characters are engaging, but it can be very difficult to progress if you just cannot click with the second person storytelling. One of my favorite aspects of this book was exploring the gods and how the magic system works. The intricacies of the magic system are incredibly nuanced, to the point that I feel like most writers would not know how to properly utilize it. And in fact, within the story, the gods themselves don't always know how to properly utilize it. It is only the stronger and longer-lived gods who actually know what they're doing and are not going to be sabotaging themselves. It is this depth and complexity that drew me in so deeply. Generally, I am only mildly interested in fantasy. I do enjoy fantasy, but I feel it gets far too repetitive. As a result, I haven't read much fantasy in years, aside from less traditional fantasy like most Neil Gaiman books. This book, however, blew me away. It took risks and gave us something quite different, and in doing so, it inspired my own writing a great deal. The one major complaint I have with the book is the way it ends, and that seems to be a common trend among the reviews that I've read online. The story builds and builds, growing increasingly intense, preparing you for 2 different points. And ultimately, it gets to one point, and it delivers, and then it gets to the next point, and right after, and it delivers, and then it's over. Like, it's almost anticlimactic, as it reaches its crescendo and then immediately cuts it off. Now, without spoiling anything, I can say I actually understand why it ended there. I feel like that is probably the proper point for the story to reach its conclusion, but that doesn't make it any less jarring. And it's kind of difficult. Like, you feel like there should be more afterwards, but there shouldn't. The nature of the story and the way that it's being told, yes, that is where it should conclude. However, from the way that most stories work, most novels, most movies, most TV shows, you expect another 20, 30 pages. You expect there to be a wrap-up. There is no wrap-up. It's just You hit that conclusion and boom, it's over. It's like this big, massive, swelling song that's building and building and building and building, and it hits the crescendo and just, okay, that's it. Over. Move on. And again, like, I understand why it ended there, but even so, it's extremely jarring. And I'm saying this having known going into it that it would be a jarring ending. Simply knowing that it ends abruptly was not enough to make me prepared for it. The Raven Tower will not be for everyone. It's complex, it's written strangely, has a somewhat frustrating ending, and is enigmatic the entire way through. But for me, so much of this is what made me love it. I appreciate a story that tries to do something different, and man, did this deliver. If you're looking for traditional fantasy, you may want to steer clear of this one. But if you want something that's still within the fantasy genre and still kind of a swords and sorcery type world, but not necessarily focused on wizards and dragons and all that, then I say give this a chance. It's definitely different, but if different's okay with you, this is worth the plunge. So yeah, The Raven Tower was good. Really good. It inspired me to rethink my approach to writing, and it gave me so many new ideas to incorporate into my stories. That is always a major plus for me. Any story that can inspire my own writing is a win. Overall, this book is a major win for me. One of my favorite books in recent years. And until next time, this is Uncle Joel saying, stay tangible.